You are the only person to have visited every single country on Earth without flying.
3 of the ships I've been on are confirmed to be at the bottom of the sea. I had cerebral malaria. I've been at Gunpoint several times.
What exactly happened when you were at Gunpoint?
These are men in uniform, and they're armed to their teeth, and they're drunk out of their mind. And at gunpoint, they command us out of the vehicle. I think that night, the entire weight of colonialism was weighing down on my shoulders.
You traveled a distance equal to going to the moon. Can you remind me how many countries you traveled to?
203. So that's 10 more than United Nations will give you. I saw it as my chance to carve a little bit of history and rank myself amongst some of these great explorers.
What advice would you give someone with a ridiculous dream that they're afraid to start?
I tell them to
Thor Peterson, you are the only person to have visited every single country on Earth without flying. How does that make you feel?
lonely, I would say. There's not a single person that can completely relate to it.
Can you elaborate on that loneliness that you felt?
I came across a word which is exulensis
Yeah.
after coming back home. And exulensis covers a resignation towards trying to explain something to someone on the basis that the one who's trying to explain is feeling that the other person is not going to understand this. And I came back home and I thought an obvious achievement and that people would respect it and that it's momentous. But I find more often than not that people, they brush it off. And especially coming from a country like Denmark, where perhaps a lot of my fellow Danes feel that if they wanted to do it, then they could do it, but they choose not to spend their life doing it. And I think that's hardly the case.
In that case, let's put some things into perspective. You traveled a distance equal to going to the moon or 10 times around the planet. More than 6,000 people have been on top of Mount Everest. More than 600 people have been to space. Less than 400 people have been to every country in the world. And only one person without a plane ever in the history of humanity.
Yeah,
You know,
it's crazy.
I don't think anyone, in a sane mind can brush that off. I certainly have a lot of questions I want to ask, both on kind of psychological level to understand, where you were at, how you were feeling throughout this process. We go through various challenges in life that make us feel all kinds of emotions, whether it's negative or positive. And I kind of want to extrapolate you may have been feeling across that journey and to see if any of the viewers can potentially draw any parallels or learn or have any takeaways for the journeys, that they will be embarking on, however different they may be. I do want to ask you, out of all the things you could have done in life, why did you do this?
Well, I was 34 when I set out, so I did choose a different path prior to all of this. I went to business school, I was drafted to the military, I was a UN peacekeeper, and I found my way into shipping and logistics where I was a trainee and then kept a job within shipping and logistics for about 12 years. So that was the path that I thought that I was on. Then in 2013, I received an email from my father. I'm fresh back in Denmark, having completed a project in the Arctic. I follow a link from this email and I read about people who'd gone to every country in the world. At the time, 2013, perhaps 200 people had been to every country in the world. And I didn't even know you could do such a thing. And at the same time, I discovered that no one has managed to complete a journey completely without flying. And I grew up worshipping adventurers, the first to go to the North Pole, the South Pole, the highest mountains, the deepest seas, and the darkest jungles, and following long rivers. And then slowly realizing that I was born too late, that all of these great firsts of the world. They were accomplished long before I was born. And in 2013, I came across this, and it had a significance for me, which I can barely relate to today, many years later. But it was very important to me, and I saw it as my chance to carve a little bit of history out and rank myself amongst some of these great explorers and people who have done remarkable things. So that was very much the basis of it when I left home in 2013. But it was a journey that gradually shifted tremendously over the years.
Can you remind me how many countries you traveled to?
Yeah, my list was comprised of 203.
203.
So that's 10 more than United Nations will give you.
I feel as if I'm well traveled. I think I'm on 53 countries, and I feel like I have so many stories to tell. I want to ask you, what's your craziest story?
Well, the craziest story would be sitting here looking back and then thinking that 3 of the ships I've been on are confirmed to be at the bottom of the sea, that I had cerebral malaria, that I traveled through West Africa during Ebola, that I was in a storm for 4 days, that I've been at gunpoint several times. That would be my craziest.
Can you go through one of the points you were at gunpoint? It's something I experienced myself once as well, traveling to Nigeria. And, it's one of my most vivid memories. I want to ask you, what exactly happened when you were at gunpoint?
Yeah, I was in Central Africa. More specifically, I was in the south of Cameroon. And I had been attempting to cross the border from Cameroon into Gabon, which is just south of Cameroon, for a while. And the odd thing about it was that I had already been to Gabon, and I left some of my belongings there, and I was now on my way back to collect that and continue the journey. But they were not having it. I had all my paperwork in order, and still I could not cross the border. And this was 2 years into my journey, and these were really difficult times. I was in a long-distance relationship, which was falling apart. I was still recovering from malaria. I had lost my financial backing at the time. I didn't fully understand the culture that I was in. I had a hard time accomplishing anything. Lots of checkpoints, lots of harassment from people in uniforms. Lots of love and kindness from ordinary people. But it was difficult to accomplish anything. I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well, and I had started to get migraine attacks for the first time in my life. I never experienced a migraine before all of this. And I was being denied crossing into Gabon one more time, and I decided, over a process, I decided, okay, I'll find a different way. And I get into a taxi, a Toyota Corolla, with a driver, and I pay him to take me 200 kilometers to the border with Congo. And we go throughout the night. It's New Year's Eve, the 31st of December, 2015. People are partying and having a good time, big loudspeakers out on the streets, and people jumping around, dancing, drinking. And then we go into the countryside and into the jungle, and there's nobody and nothing. And we keep going on this dusty road into the night. It's well past midnight now, and there's nothing. There's just us and dust, and then the jungle on both sides and the darkness. And then around 3 a.m., there are 3 shadows in front of us, and we come closer, and these are men in uniform, and they're armed to their teeth, and they're drunk out of their mind. And at gunpoint, they command us out of the vehicle, and at the point when they realize that I'm not local, that's when you really see the rage shine through, especially from one of these uniformed men. And you could smell the sweat, and you had the sound of the insects in the jungle and the heat and the humidity. I had no doubt that this was the end of the line for me. This was so out of control. They all had their finger on the trigger, which is, first of all, not very professional. It's very dangerous. And then when you combine that with alcohol and emotion, then things can quickly go wrong. Plus, while Central Africa is a beautiful and fantastic part of our world for so many reasons, it's unfortunately also a part of our world where life does not always hold the same value as it does for us, and lives are lost. People disappear. and nobody knew that I was there at that location at that time. So even by mistake, I could have lost my life. I was absolutely confident that I had seconds left, minutes at best.
Why was there rage? Why were there fingers on the trigger?
Well, people who look like me
Yeah.
have historically not treated these countries very well.
Okay.
So I think that night, the entire weight of colonialism was weighing down on my shoulders. And especially this one out of the three, you could see the hatred in his eyes, and the emotion was truly taking over.
And perhaps this feeling of wanting to take revenge. Let's say
I think that's a strong feeling for a lot of people in power.
Yeah.
That they have some vendetta for something. Well, it's always about money in the end, but sometimes the amount is so big that it's not truly about money in the moment. And I've been in several situations, especially at checkpoints and border crossings, where someone has had power over me, and that has been more important to them than anything else. That there's something I want, and they're in a position where they can
Control.
They can deny it. Yes,
Yeah.
Control.
100%. I mean, you've been through crazy amount of challenges on your travels. Was there any challenge that you feel you underestimated?
The entire challenge
The entire challenge
of
fair enough.
accomplishing
The trip itself.
such a journey. I left home very naive. Looking back, I can't even believe how naive I was. I thought that this was going to be embraced by basically anyone who heard about it. I thought that this would just spiral into something really, really big, that sponsorships would just be thrown at me and support, and every ship would be available. And then realizing that on a day-to-day basis, people are busy with their lives and nobody really truly cared about what I was doing, and I wasn't getting the support where I was hoping for it. That bubble slowly burst as I was going along. I'd say I completely underestimated how difficult the paperwork is, getting certain visas, getting travel documents to go to certain regions, getting invitation letters in parts of the world. And to be honest, most of the world is probably straightforward. You can move with relative ease. There are a few places where you truly get stuck on it. And I was doing things that no one had ever done before. So there wasn't much advice to be found in certain situations. Then, of course, island nations that are within the Caribbean, distance between the island nations isn't all that great. Sometimes you can see the next country, and even that is quite difficult to navigate. So the Pacific, with tiny island nations, with astronomical distance between them, and no ferries. So there's no option to buy a ticket and just go. You need to gain favor with a container ship or a cruise ship or someone else.
What do you mean you need to gain favor with a container ship or cruise ship?
So container ships do not take passengers. That's not their line of business.
Yeah.
One way to try to understand that is that if you're in a city and you walk into an office and you talk to the receptionist and say, "Can I sleep on the floor?" They would assume that you're crazy. They'd say, "Go sleep anywhere else." But there are hostels, there are hotels. Go and sleep in a park. Why you're not going to sleep in the office?
And just for clarity for anyone listening, container ships are ships that have containers that contain, let's say, products that are transported all around the world.
Correct. So if you imagine a container ship as a floating city, the entire purpose with these ships are to deliver goods from one port to the next within the containers.
No passengers.
No passengers. So you have a crew on board, maybe you have 10, 15, 20 seafarers on board. They have a routine, they have a cabin, they have a job, they have their training, and they work 60, 70, 80 hours a week on board. They're there to work and perform, and the ship is there to carry the cargo. And a passenger is an interference to that. There is no business model. So why would they ever take a passenger? Bringing a passenger could even cause trouble.
100%, yeah.
So
Creates liability.
and it's a hassle. So if you're in an office working within shipping and logistics and you receive an email from some traveler, backpacker, or someone who's very inspiring, who knows, someone emails you and says, hello, I know you have a ship going from A to B. I would like to join that ship. What are you going to do with that email? You have a busy day. You have hundreds of emails pouring in. You're likely going to delete it, or maybe you'll give that person a kind reply saying, that's not what we do, but good luck, something like this. So you're dealing with a tremendous amount of rejection, and people on and off contact me and say, how did I do it? And I try to give some advice, and then often I hear from people again where they say, I tried, but everyone is saying, no, it's impossible. And I think the key is never to give up. If one door is closed, you look for another door, and you look for the next door and the next door, and 5 doors, 10 doors, 100 doors, 1,000 doors. But at that point when you stop knocking on doors, that's when you fail.
Absolutely.
So that's what I mean. To gain favor, you want them to understand that it has a significance. That's what I'm looking for. So to gain an understanding with them that it has significance, that there's a reason why they should take you on board. And in reality, there's no reason. So you have to invent something that you can share something on social media, or you can write about how they treat their seafarers, or how environmentally friendly they are. You can put that in your blog, or in my case, that they're taking part in something historical, and then hope that they that they accept.
Yeah, I think there's a very big key takeaway from that. Not everyone is going to buy into your vision, and that's absolutely fine. But it's important that you still pursue that goal. And on that journey, you'll be rejected many times. You'll fail many times. But every failure and every rejection takes you one single step closer to success.
Right.
And, I hope that, again, for people listening, if they're going through something where they feel they're experiencing very consistent rejection and failure, if that thing to them is important enough, they should just continue facing those rejections and failures until the day comes that they succeed.
I generally believe that to be true, but then you also have to be sure that whatever people are fighting for is worth fighting for. Because there are some people that have some ideas that I do not want them to succeed
pursue.
with.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, exactly. As long as no one is harmed, it's a net positive on the world and themselves.
Plus, I would say that I hope that I can inspire people to fight for the things they want and the things they dream about, and not to give up in those moments of doubt. But there's also some truth to that. It is okay to give up in some situations. Say you start an education, and it's a 4 or 5 year education, and you're 2 years into it, and you discover this is really not what I want to do with my life. Then perhaps there's a valid point that you should move away from that and go towards what you really want to do, and not necessarily complete the remaining 3 years.
Yeah.
So there's a delicate balance between saying it's okay to give up and saying never give up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I was referring to, don't give up if it's something you really want to pursue. Obviously, if you have a change of heart at some point, I agree, it's better to cut your losses at some point than to, continue doing something that you don't necessarily believe in, or that's not a net positive. How did long-term, consistent uncertainty feel?
I guess it just becomes the everyday reality that you do not hold all the answers, but that's okay. That you know what you have up until the point where you are, and you know what you're aiming at right now, and you have an idea about how you're going to get what you're going for. So you're reaching. But yeah, it's stressful. I think a lot of people can relate to not knowing when the global pandemic happened, that no one knew when this was going to be over. No one knew exactly how it was going to end or how long it was going to take. And that uncertainty stresses people. In the same way that you see that at pedestrian crossings, that when you're facing a red light and you do not know how long it will be until it changes to green and you can cross. And you see that they started putting up counters that count down from 30 to 1. And that gives people ease. Now they know, okay, they're waiting for 30 seconds. And the same with trains and metros, that there is something that indicates how long you're waiting. This has been tested, that people are willing to wait for 4 minutes, knowing that it's 4 minutes, with more ease than they are to wait for 2 minutes, not knowing that it's 2 minutes.
Why is that?
It's the uncertainty. If you do not know you're waiting for 2 minutes, your brain might go to, I could be here for 10 minutes, I could be here for half an hour, and that starts torturing you. But if it says 4 minutes and you trust it, say that's fine. Then you have clearance, you say, this is what's going to happen. I can give you a real life example. I was in the Pacific. I had just visited Marshall Islands, which is a Pacific island nation. I'd gone with a ship to Federated States of Micronesia, and now I wanted to go to Palau, which is another island nation in the Pacific. And the container ship, the shipping company that I was collaborating with, did not have that connection. And I desperately wanted to go home. I'd been away from home for 6 years at this point. I really, really wanted to go home. But then the shipping company offered that they could take me up to Hong Kong, which was well out of the way. And then I would wait in Hong Kong for 4 days, and then I would connect with another ship and go to Palau. So even though this took extra time, because it wasn't a direct connection, I felt okay with that solution because I knew how much time it would take, and I knew I had a solution.
Yeah, I guess we are creatures of familiarity and let's say strict routine, or wanting to know what next steps are ahead of us.
I think so.
But I guess in your situation, it makes a lot of sense because the alternatives, may not be ideal scenarios.
Coming back to your question, I would say the uncertainty for me was that I had vowed not to return home until I reached the final country.
Yeah.
Of course, I could quit. It's like being in prison and having the key at the same time, but knowing that if you use the key, there are certain consequences with that. And we talk about looking for light at the end of the tunnel. And for years and years and years, there was absolutely no light. I wasn't far enough into the tunnel. So that was difficult. Once you have the light at the end of the tunnel, you have this as hope, as motivation. But it was years and years and years before there was any such light.
You were the only person to travel every single country on Earth without a plane. There are, a few hundred that have traveled the world or every single country on Earth with a plane. Was there anything you learned from your journey that someone else traveling the same path by plane might have never experienced?
Yes, definitely. For me, this was this slow progression from one country to the next, where I'm in a bus or I'm in a train, and I go from desert, and suddenly I see a bush, and I see a few more, and I see a tree, and it turns into a forest, and it all goes green, and suddenly there are some rocks, and there's a mountain, and you see how things gradually change, and you see where countries they meet. So if you fly from one country to the next, you do not necessarily experience where countries they meet. And in my experience, very, very few borders across our planet are borders where you step across and you immediately experience a significant change. In most cases, there's no difference if you're on one side of the border or the other. It's the same plants, the same vegetation, it's the same type of buildings. Often there's a border language. People are dressed more or less the same way. People look the same. The genetic makeup of people is the same on both sides. Often you would have to travel a fair distance within the country to start to understand that you have reached a new country and really feel that difference. Also, there's an element of distance in general. It's a common phrase to say it's a small world. Anytime people say it's a small world, I jump out of my seat and go, it's not. It's not a small world. It's a big world, but it is well connected. But to many people, it is a small world because you're in London and you hop on a flight and you're in New York. And
you don't get that perspective.
Do not
when
get
you're
the
on a
perspective of the distance.
I mean, going on a plane is essentially a slow version of teleportation. You know, you get into this aluminium cylinder, and then 7 hours later, you travel halfway across the world. You go from Dubai to London.
Yeah.
And as you say, you don't truly experience that transition and change and terrain that's kind of slow, gradual. You know, I had never thought of it kind of that way. It's interesting.
It's quite evident with musicians that are on tour and they go up on stage and they say, well, what's going on, Stockholm? And they are in Berlin or something like this, that they move around so quickly they don't even know where they are.
Yeah. It's all a blur.
Yeah.
You must have experienced some interesting elements of, you know, general perspective and human connection. For me, I would find it very interesting to travel to all these different countries and meeting all these different people across different cultures. I think there's so much to learn, not just from people that are more experienced and more intelligent than you necessarily, but I also think there's a lot of things to learn in life by just ordinary people that come from different places, that have different perspectives, that have different experiences. And it's something, obviously, you know, with this podcast, one thing that drove me to doing it was this aspect of having conversations with people that come from different walks of life, that have different perspectives. So I wanted to just ask you, were there any conversations that you had that particularly stuck with you from your travels?
There are a few. One that comes to mind was a conversation with a taxi driver in Yemen. So I had entered Yemen from Oman, and I spent I spent only one night in Yemen. So I had to spend a minimum of 24 hours. So I clocked that. And within that time in Yemen, I was offered to stay in a hotel which had not opened yet. It was going to open the next day. So I ended up being the very first guest. And it was these two young guys that had renovated a building and created a hotel out of it. And one guy, he spoke English very well. And the day I was leaving in a taxi going back to the border with Oman, and I was catching a ship the very same day and heading onwards. And we opened the door to the taxi and look inside, and the taxi driver is there smiling, and then from the rear view mirror there is a picture of Saddam Hussein hanging. I look at that and I look at the driver and I say, that's Saddam Hussein. And the driver goes, yes. And I say, why is Saddam Hussein hanging in your taxi? And he says, he's a hero. And I says, is he? Is Saddam Hussein a hero? And the taxi driver, he explained that his village was under attack. There was no United States, there was no United Nations, there was no one came to assist his village when they were under attack. But Saddam Hussein and Iraq, they came with troops and equipment and training and supported his village. So of course there are layers to this in terms of religion and politics. But I don't know how much you can expect that this taxi driver in Yemen is supposed to understand about geopolitics,
of course,
or Kurds and horrible weapons and this kind of thing. What he understood was that when no one came to save him and his people, Saddam Hussein came. So Saddam Hussein is a hero.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, there's not only so much to learn, but there's so many potential intriguing conversations to be had with random, ordinary people across the world. I feel a lot of people today, they're very transactional in their intent with conversation when it comes to people that they don't know, especially now because we have smartphones. You know, if we're, I don't know, in another country, we're waiting for an elevator, or we get into a taxi, or we're crossing the street, or we're in a bus. You know, we generally in this day and age are very reluctant to strike up a conversation. But I just feel, I don't know, some of the most interesting conversations that I've had in my life are with very ordinary people that just are from a completely different world to me. You know, there's a lot of perspective to be gained, and you can disagree with that perspective.
No, I fully agree.
You know,
I've spoken with people. I've spoken with people in every country in the world. There's not a single
Yeah.
country in the world where I've not spoken with people. There's not a country in the world that I have not exposed my senses to. I've tasted something in every country. I've seen something. I've smelled something. I've touched something. I heard something. But yeah, I have another story for you. So in West Africa and in Central Africa, I quickly learned that once you get into a mode of transportation, a minibus or a shared taxi or a bus with space for 80, 90 passengers or so, you become a team. So whatever happens to that mode of transportation, you're in it together. And you're in there and you're talking to people and, you know, striking conversations. Often I'll come into the bus and I don't know anyone, and I come out of the bus and I have a place to sleep, and I have the connections I need, and I have different ideas for how I can solve the things that I'm working with and so on. So these vehicles, they come to checkpoints. There are many, many checkpoints in West Africa and Central Africa, and in certain countries there are a tremendous amount of checkpoints. And so it comes to a halt, and sometimes it's everybody out of the vehicle, and sometimes the authorities come on board and this kind of stuff. But we're in it together. So that was my full understanding of how the region was. And then this one time I was in a Toyota Land Cruiser, and there was a driver next to me. I was in the front seat, and there were 3 women in the back. And then all our luggage up on top. And we're going down a red dirt road, and lush green nature around us. It's in daytime, beautiful blue sky. And we come to this tiny checkpoint, a small wooden hut, and there's big, obese, very corrupt military or policeman, something like this. Probably not police, military. And he wants to see paperwork. And this process starts. Do you have a passport? Yes. Is it valid? Yes. Do you have your visa? Yes. Is it valid? Yes. Do you have your invitation letter? Yes. Do you have vaccine? Do you have this? Do you have that? Yes, 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 yes. And then at some point he goes, where's the receipt for your visa? And I go, there's no receipt for my visa is my receipt. The visa is proof that I paid for it. And he went, no, no, no. You have to have a receipt. Otherwise, you know, you could be in cahoots with the guy at the border. Maybe you paid half price, gave him some money, no receipt. How do I know?
God.
I'm going to call the police. You're going to prison. This and that. And they build up this. And it's all about corruption. It's all about bribing and trying to get a little bit extra at the border. And this happens again and again and again. So normally I was able to control this. Normally I was able to stay cool in those situations and play the game. But a couple of times I completely lost it. And this was one of those days. So I start shouting about corruption and inefficiency of the country and that things could be better if things weren't like this. And so at which point he fully understands that he has won. He has won over me. When I lose it, he wins. And then one of the women comes over to me, and she kind of pulls me aside, and I'm like, what? And I'm completely losing it. You know, I'm just shouting and said, what? And she says, just give him $10 and then we can move and everything's fine. And I explode and go, I'm not going to. I didn't pay a bribe at any point throughout the entire journey. Wow. It goes completely against what I believe in. So here I am, not wanting to pay a bribe. She's suggesting I should do it. I explode and I go like, no, I'm not going to do this, and so on. So then this obese uniformed man, he says, I'm going to call the police. You're going to prison. He calls over. This little skinny guy with big sunglasses comes over and doesn't say a thing. He's just standing there. The police is here. He's going to arrest you. Then the driver comes over and says, I'm so sorry. We do not have time for this. Can you point out what your luggage is? And I'll take your luggage down and then we will continue without you. We cannot wait for this to solve itself. And I explode even more. And I start shouting about that, in this part of the world, you have nothing but time. Everybody has time. Everything is delayed. Everything takes 10 times as much time as it's supposed to. What are you talking about? You do not have time. I thought we were a team. I thought we were in this together, and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually this uniformed, obese guy with the power, he goes, all right, I think it's okay. You can go. You can go. I said, yeah, I know it's okay. I know it was okay 10 minutes ago. Okay, I'll go. And I get into this Toyota again, and I'm sitting there, and we continue driving. The 3 women in the back. The driver's next to me. He's smiling, maybe whistling a little bit, driving this Toyota through the landscape. And I'm steaming. I go like, he was going to leave me at this checkpoint. So I start saying some small stuff to him, like, oh, that was really nice. So you're going to leave me. Håkan, that's not the hospitality I expected of your country or that I have experienced in your country. And then one of the women in the back, she says, he helped you. I go like, helped? He was going to leave me. And then she said, he was never going to leave you. He was playing the game. By walking up and saying he was going to leave you at the border, he was putting pressure at the checkpoint. So now if you were left behind, the checkpoint would have to deal with me indefinitely, maybe even feed me and give me a place to stay. So they were forced in this situation to let me go. So he saved me. He was never going to leave me. And then in 1 second, the guy who I thought was my sworn enemy who's driving this vehicle was my best friend. And that was, for me, that was a conversation. This woman saying, he helped me, where everything falls into place, and I learned something about the culture and the part of the world I was in.
Well, that explains perfectly a quote that you said that really resonated with me, which was, a stranger is a friend you've never met before.
Yes, that's correct.
Right? I think that's a beautiful quote. How was it experiencing so many different cultures? And was there anything across all these different cultures that you felt all people had in common?
Yes, absolutely. So the motto, a stranger is a friend you've never met before, was just something that sounded nice when I left home. And within the first few weeks of travel, this was something that had been proven over and over again. And going through every country in the world, this was proven an unbelievable amount of times. That is the truth for me. A stranger is a friend you've never met before. But it slowly also transitioned into a philosophy, a way of thinking. Because of course not everyone can be your friend. That's not the world we live in, unfortunately. But most people can. And I think at the end of the day, it really depends on how are you behaving? How do you come to another person? Do you look them in the eyes? Do you remember their name? Do you let them speak? Are you kind? Are you polite? Or are you all the opposite? So for me, that's what a stranger is a friend you've never met before really encompasses. Going through the world, I found that, to me at least, it is not truly religion or politics or borders that shape people and form their identity. For me, it is the environment that they're living in. And I think on a day-to-day basis, we understand this, that village people are not the same as city people. But it's also true about mountain people and island people. It's the same. You'll see a difference between island people, mountain people, desert people, people who live in lush environments, that they're shaped by this. So in reality, someone who's living in the Alps in Europe and up in the mountains, they will have more in common with, or at least something in common with, someone living in the Himalayas. And I think it comes down to understanding that if you have a bucket of water and you need to carry it up, then there's hardship in that. So you automatically get that understanding. In the same way as if you grow up in the desert, then you will quickly come to an understanding that you cannot cope alone on your own. You need to work as a team, which means that you are in close proximity with other people and you eat together and you do things together, you solve things together. Whereas if you're living somewhere where the fruits are just on trees and plants everywhere around you and there's water everywhere and you don't really have to work hard to survive, then chances are suddenly that people are not as helpful because they're not growing up in a environment that puts pressure on them to be helpful. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely.
So going around the world, like people on island nations, small island nations, would often, when they hear I'm going to every country in the world, come from a perspective where they understood it. I'm sailing to every country in the world. Where my reality was, no, I'm sailing to these few island nations there are in the world. Everything else is train and bus and taxi and walking. But in their world, it's an island world that we're living in. Yeah, so that's something I saw with people. Something else I saw was that generally people are positioned in life to offer kindness and hospitality. It's not, in my opinion, to say that people are inherently good. I think that the situation that most people are in doesn't offer any real excuse not to be good. There's no incentive to harass or be cruel for most people. So when we encounter people, pretty much no matter where we go, we will get this kindness, a curiosity, maybe a sense of humor, assistance from people. And you could, now I went without flying, but the expression would be to parachute me into the world, anywhere in the world. And I'm pretty sure I would be fine just based on human decency and kindness. And then it doesn't mean that people are willing to do anything for you. There are limits, and in some parts of our world, in some cultures, people are willing to do far more for us than in other cultures. But generally, you'll find this kindness because people are just trying to carve out a part of the world for themselves where they can feel safe and their friends and their immediate family can be safe and have a chance on this planet. And they're not considered with toppling government or starting some terror cell.
How would you say this all altered your perspective?
I fully trust in people. I have a lot of hope for humanity as kind and decent people. Not necessarily as people that will rise to the challenge and fix all the problems we have in the world. I think people are closer to themselves, like an immediate circle of friends and family, and do not necessarily relate to people in the neighboring village or the neighboring country. But on a general level, people are decent and they have goodwill.
I think that's a very powerful message because, again, when experiencing something tough or running into a few people in life that have given you a terrible time, that have mistreated you, you've had unfair situations, maybe you got screwed over in a personal situation or a business deal, that coming from someone who's been to more than 200 countries in the world can reassure you that most people are kind, generous, and good people.
I have sort of a concept that I developed after returning back home, where I came home and I looked at the world map and I realized that while I've been to every country in the world, I have not been to a single country where I did not receive kindness and help and support from a complete stranger. And that led me to think that maybe when we're dealing with humanity, when we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with a reversed lottery. Whereas in a conventional lottery, you buy a ticket and the odds are against you and you know you're going to lose. But as long as you're dealing with people, you're winning. And the odds are pretty much always in your favor. And it's possible to lose, but generally you're constantly winning.
That's a great perspective to have. Very good perspective to have. And I think, thinking about it, I would have to agree. It's true. There are terrible people. There are people who don't care about doing good. But the vast majority of people are good. And so you shouldn't enable negative experiences, even if you have a few consecutive negative experiences with people, to necessarily change your outlook for the next person.
People are not black and white, so someone at a checkpoint or a border in a uniform which holds power over me and is being cruel and mean and unpleasant towards me is not necessarily a bad person. When that person goes home, takes the uniform off and plays with his children and goes out and provides for the family, that same person could be amazing.
Yeah,
right?
maybe they have two different kind of characters in life.
I think
that
we
they
all
play
we
and
all
live.
have.
Yeah.
I mean, very few of us are constantly good. Something I was trying to work out while I was traveling, which I spent a lot of time thinking about in buses and trains, is am I a good person who sometimes missteps, or am I evil, trying to project that I'm good? And I've gone back and forth, and I've tried to attack that in so many different ways. And the outcome for me is that we're both. As humans, we have the capability of both. You can have someone who's been good all their life, and then you give them power, and you'll see them change.
You're the only person in history to visit the Red Cross in as many countries as you have. Why did you feel, compelled to visit the Red Cross in as many countries as possible?
So back in 2013, when I was starting to think about going to every country without flying, I brought some friends on board, and we were looking at what kind of social media and what kind of values and a web page and what we were going to put on the web page. And one afternoon I was lying on my bed and I was just looking at the ceiling and I was thinking, someone could benefit from this. This is big. This is huge. Someone should be benefiting from this. So what's it going to be? Is it save the pandas? Is it clean drinking water? And I had some engagement with the Danish Red Cross at the time. And I knew that the Red Cross, being the world's largest humanitarian organization, is found in basically every country around the world. So I just saw synergy within that. So I thought about it for a bit, and then I went to my friends that were helping me with the project, and I said, what do you think? And everyone agreed this could be good. So I went to the Danish Red Cross and I presented the project, and then through a process, they made me a goodwill ambassador of the Danish Red Cross, and they gave me some Red Cross equipment, like something I could hold for pictures and that kind of stuff. And then they tasked me with writing a always present story for each national society around the world. So national society is the Red Cross or Red Crescent in each individual country. Now, at the time, there were 187 or 189 national societies around the world. And I don't think anyone, neither the Red Cross or myself, we thought about how huge a task that in reality was. So I started off trying to reach the German Red Cross, which was the first country after Denmark, and eventually got in touch with them and sat down with someone from the German Red Cross and interviewed them and wrote a story, took some photos, sent it to the Danish Red Cross. Then I went to Netherlands. I did the same. Then I went, this is the only way I saw that I could solve this task. Writing an always present story. I could sit at home and do the research and do web calls, but if I'm going to every country in the world, it made sense to meet with these people, to go to these places. And it kept going and going and going. And then eventually I ended up visiting the world's largest humanitarian organization in basically every country around the world, raising funds, raising awareness, and symbolically connecting the Red Cross globally.
Wow, that's a pretty big feat.
It's also something that changes perspective. Because in my project, which we named Once Upon a Saga, so within Once Upon a Saga, I aimed to cross the finish line. This was one element. I aimed to promote the Red Cross, and I aimed to promote every country in the world in a positive sense. So look for the good.
And you have a book.
And I have a book as well.
Yeah, which is going to be a fantastic read. I can't wait to read it personally.
Yeah.
I'm half Turkish, half English.
Right.
You seem to have a special affinity towards Turkey, or as some call it, Turkey.
Turkey, yeah.
Can you
especially recently.
Yeah. It's like something that a lot of Turkish people take very close to heart. If you call it Turkey, some people get offended.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't. But yeah, why do you have a special affinity towards Turkey?
Well, given that you're half Turkish, I'll go with that. So generally, I would say I do not have a special affinity for Turkey. I love every country in the world, but I do have something towards Istanbul. So for me, Istanbul could, for me, be the greatest city in the world. And it's a city where I find that I will never run tired, that there's always something to see and do and discover. I have a little bit of history with Turkey, which is that when I was younger, I rode a motorcycle from India and then back to Europe. And when I was in the very east of Turkey, I was in Erzurum, and I bought a new motorcycle there. And I drove it across from east to west, and it would go the Asian part and then all the way to the European part. And then I was trying to sell it in Istanbul, which was very, very difficult because it was registered to my name and the paperwork was insanely complicated. And then eventually, on one of the last days before I needed to leave Istanbul, I met a young guy who wanted the motorcycle, and he called his father, and we went on this 3-day odyssey of paperwork and red tape. And eventually I was able to pass the motorcycle to him. But when we were on the way to the very last office to get the last signature and stamp, I was driving with the father on the back, and I crashed the motorcycle. And there was some damage to his pants and to the motorcycle, and the price then dropped a little bit further, and we went over and signed the paper. And I actually met up with them just a few weeks ago. I was back. So they remember me now, still many years later.
I can imagine. An unforgettable story. You were traveling for literally 10 years. What did that cost you personally?
The Eagles has a song, Hotel California, and there's a line in that I've been thinking a lot about in the past few weeks, which is you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. And I have been trying to come back home since I physically came back home. But mentally, I'm also trying to come back home. And I have rewired my brain. I've pretty much brainwashed myself through almost a decade of my life doing the same. For nearly 10 years, I was the guy who was trying to reach every country in the world without flying. And I had this long list of countries, and then slowly I was able to tick them off. And I had a long list of things I needed to do. I needed to promote the country. I needed to visit with the Red Cross. I needed to take a picture of the sunset, a picture of somebody's eyes, bring a gift from one country to the next. A ton of stuff I had to do. And that was my life, and that was my identity for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I'm home. And there's an element of, now what? For almost 10 years, my budget was $20 per day, living on a rock. $20 for transportation, accommodation, visas. It's a completely different life that I'm sort of mentally stuck within.
So you had a tough time kind of transitioning back to a different reality.
It's not easy. So many things have changed, but the world changed while I went through it. So I saw a lot of this change. But it was the first time coming back to Denmark and seeing the change in Denmark. And in some way, I speculate that the person who left Denmark in 2013 never came back home. And in a philosophical way, I think that person died at that checkpoint in the jungle 2 years in, and someone else left that jungle. So there's this entire trying to find out, who am I? Yeah. Which I think a lot of people are trying to work out who they are at certain points of their life.
Absolutely.
But I'm really trying to find out, who am I? What do I mean? Who am I in other people's eyes? When I left in 2013, the only people who knew me were my friends and my colleagues. Now, a decade later, I've done media in 170, 180 countries around the world. I have a book out. There's a documentary. Who knows how many people have heard about me? Who am I to all of those people? Am I a goodwill ambassador of the Red Cross? Am I someone who inspired? Am I a selfish person who spent 10 years of my life trying to accomplish something?
I agree in that it's a fantastic thing to be able to look internally, potentially psychoanalyze. Not everyone has the capacity to be able to do that. But I think you've had a phenomenal achievement without damaging anyone or anything, and inspiring many others. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you 2 final questions. If you could speak to yourself on day one, what warning or reassurance would you give?
Well, I would warn myself against doing it.
You may not do it.
Yeah, I would tell myself not to do it. I'd tell myself you're not embarking on a 4-year project. You're embarking on a 10-year project. This is going to wear you down physically, mentally. Your life is going to be at risk several times throughout all of this. And the price is going to be incredibly high for accomplishing it. At the end of it, you will wonder, was it truly, truly worth it? It has to be worth it because I'm not getting my time back. But the reassurance that I would be giving is that it will be an education unlike anything else. This will not be 10 years of personal growth. This will be 70 years, 80 years of life experience crammed into a decade. And you're going to be okay. You're going to survive it. No matter what you do within those 10 years, you are going to survive it. And you'll come home and you will be able to start a family and you will be able to get both the project that you wanted to complete and a beautiful daughter.
It's magical.
Yeah.
And Thor, what advice would you give someone with a ridiculous dream that they're afraid to start?
I would tell them to evaluate if this is really what they want, if they believe that there's value in it for themselves or for others. And then I would say, if you truly believe in it and this is something you want to embark on, then make it happen. Find a date, if you can't do it on your own, then find the friends or the people that you need to make this happen, and then go out and give it a go. And when it gets really hard, which pretty much anything that has value will get, then you have to fight through that. That's when people, they quit. It's when it gets difficult and people, they reevaluate, is it worth it? That's when you have to push through. Say, those days will come, and if you really want it, keep pushing.
Beautifully said. Thor Peterson, thank you so much for coming on Truth Central.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And this time has not been enough. I look forward to continuing our conversation off the camera and learning more about you and your experiences.
Me too. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure.